All right. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone who's joining live and everyone who is going to be watching the recording. For everyone watching live or recorded, particularly for everyone watching recording, you can always send me an email to ask any follow-up questions that are going to come about after this presentation. Also, make sure that you send me an email if you want me to email you the PowerPoint. Now, of course, the PowerPoint will come through in the recording, but if you actually want a copy of the PowerPoint, then just send me an email and I will send you the actual PowerPoint so that you can have that. Because there's a few pieces in the information that might be useful to have hard copy of. All right, so the point of this free talk, and there's going to be a whole series of free talks, is to get information out there. And the recordings, everyone who asked me an email will get this recording, but also my goal is to actually get it up on a YouTube channel, which I have no technical ability to do, but that's why I've hired some people to do that for me. So there will be a Dr. Sarah Hazel YouTube channel, and all of these free talks will be posted on the YouTube channel, especially when I start getting into more technical things and start showing some of the exercises or the therapies or the how-tos. I want to make sure that there's a place that people can go for that resource. So this is the introductory big picture talk about really taking a step back and understanding the power of women, understanding the power of the feminine essence, and how all of that relates to our modern understanding of how to heal, optimize, and treat women in terms of our personal practices, lifestyle, wellness, but also in terms of medicine and in terms of navigating what's happening right now out there in the medical world, in the healing world, and in the wellness space. So I feel like I've got a few things to share as I'm listening, watching, mentoring other practitioners, and having my own patients as well. So there's some themes that have been coming up for a lot of years, and this is my attempt to address them in a bigger scale. So medicine women for a modern age, new science and old wisdom. So what I want to do in this series is really try to highlight some of the most interesting pieces about our modern scientific Western understanding of female health, female well-being, illness, and also reach back and grab from all of the traditional ways of looking at healing, at health, from Chinese medicine, from Ayurvedic medicine, from natural health practices of different lineages, and show how that thinking, that wisdom actually applies very much so to what's happening for modern women. But we're also going to talk about some science too. Oh, hi. For those of you that don't know me, that might find me on YouTube in the future. Hi, I'm Dr. Sarah Hazel. I have been a naturopathic physician, functional medicine practitioner for almost 3 decades. I've been in family practice, and I have also been faculty in multiple different institutions, medical schools, and online programs, and have shared and learned from women, from medicine, and from different traditions now from thousands of patients and from many, many years of practice. So that's where all this is coming from. So where are we when it comes to understanding women and medicine and health? I think we're in a time of transition. There are some pretty dramatic changes that are beginning to percolate through our cultural, social understanding, as well as beginning to percolate through our treatment in medicine of women. And it's something to just call out that the research that we have, the best and the brightest of scientific evolution and research, takes many years, generally speaking, to become standard of care. There's a delay. as the science gets vetted, tested, and reviewed, and eventually becomes what's taught, whether in medical school or continuing ed classes or in conferences, there's a delay. And I think what we're seeing right now is a real delay in actual practice. For a lot of women, what they're experiencing from their healthcare is not necessarily fully encompassing all that we know from the scientific side of things. And it's certainly not encompassing all of the wisdoms, the traditions, and the practices that I have found incredibly useful when helping people transform and to heal, particularly if they're women. So, big picture is we have in the midst of all of this growing body of research in science and medicine, it has not slowed down the increasing rates of chronic disease across the board, men and women, but certainly chronic and complex disease is at a higher rate in women. Autoimmune conditions are hitting women higher. There are a lot of conditions of degeneration and inflammation that affect women more than men, certainly by a large percentage, actually. We're having across the board here in the Western world, particularly in America, increasing rates of ill health. Americans spend more money than any other developed country on medicine, and yet we have greater rates of illness by far than any other country. We have an increasing rate of obesity. We have increasing mental health problems, dramatically increasing in the past few years. We have increasing stress complaints. We have increasing hormone disorders. We have increasing rates of infertility, and we have an aging female population. So we have more millions of women that are going through perimenopause and menopause and all of these other disease states. And on top of all that, it looks like perimenopause is happening earlier for more and more women here in the West. And what used to be fairly uncommon, certainly I found it uncommon 30 years ago, was rare to see women who were like 35, mid 30s, who were clearly going through perimenopause symptoms, significant perimenopause. And we're seeing this more and more. I'm seeing it more and more. And there's probably a number of different reasons about that, but we'll touch on them. What it means to be a woman is always probably changing culturally, socially, scientifically, in our understanding of medicine applied to women's health. All of that is changing and is evolving. But right now, women are getting and have been getting for decades mixed messaging about what a woman can be and what a woman should be. We have an increasingly toxic food supply on top of that, with hormone disruptors and environmental toxins that increase both male and female imbalances. We have increasing rates of inflammation because of this toxic food supply, increasing rates of mental and emotional disease that can be tied to this toxic food supply. We have gut health problems that are just exploding off the charts, microbiome destruction, and now we've got lots of evidence that shows that what's happening in our gut and our microbiome is having a profound effect on our health. It affects how much we weigh, it affects our hormones, it affects our neurotransmitters, our mood, our immune system, our energy, our vitality, a whole host of other issues. This toxic food supply is impacting all of these things and overall is creating a severe challenge to our health and to our lifespans. The American lifespan average is actually going down right now as we speak. So not just the food supply toxins, we have environmental toxins in our air, water, clothes, cosmetics. I'm calling out the clothes and cosmetics because not only this is certainly affecting men as well, but the amount of lotions and hair products and nail products and cosmetics that women put on their bodies far exceeds that of most men. And the amount of environmental and hormone disrupting toxins in these things can be quite extraordinarily high, actually. We also, however, are getting these things from our furniture, from our buildings, from our surroundings. They are accumulating and contributing to this overall decline in health and definitely wrecking our hormones. We've got also lifestyle factors, greater diet factors, not just the toxic food supply, but exactly what and how we are eating and when we are eating and how much we are eating. We've got social, cultural factors that are all derailing our inherent healing and repair capacity. And this is creating anxiety and mood disorders, degenerative diseases, chronic and complex diseases of all kinds, and overall general lack of vitality and well-being. In addition to all of these things, experiencing in our private and public relationships, challenges and traumas can hinder growth, success, and healing. So when we go looking for answers, there are lots of places to look, and there are lots of places that might hold the answer or answers for individual women. And just because I'm about to list this, and believe me, this is not a complete list. This is just a collection of boxes of thinking that when I am, or you, when you yourself are looking at yourself, or for all the doctors that watch this and practitioners that watch this, when you are looking at the case and you're trying to figure out how to help a woman solve the challenges that she's coming to you with, we look in different places. We certainly can look to diet. We can look to supplements. We can look to exercise, hormones themselves, very specifically and directly. We can look at sleep patterns, stress patterns, rest patterns, environmental detoxification, of course, sauna and hydrotherapies, various versions of water therapy, hots and colds and treatments, meditations, nature herself, going into nature and interacting with nature in various ways, various kinds of yoga, acupuncture, qigong, emotional therapy, cognitive therapy, not always the same thing. And we will unpack more. Light therapies of different kinds. A lot of us think of red light therapies and infrared therapies, but there's also certain blue lights. There are certain equipment that now are combining different frequencies of light to different purposes. And many of these things have strong anti-inflammatory effects, immune enhancing effects, hormone balancing, neurotransmitter effects. So light therapies is all in one box. Body work. They're so like every single box I want to like unpack deeply. But when I say body work, I mean a range of self-applied massage, getting massage, doing body work, doing fascia therapy, doing different kinds of therapies involving moving the body, touching ourselves in particular ways to unlock and treat, but also receiving expert care and expert touch from various different kinds of therapeutic ways. And I guess I'm pausing here a little bit because I think women's bodies in particular often hugely benefited from the appropriate kinds of body therapy, touch therapy, that when done right and when taken to the right level can have immensely positive effects. And that doesn't just mean going to someone else to get that therapy. There's also a lot of self-treatment and self-care that can be delivered that I would put under the category of body work. There are, of course, herbs, botanical medicines of different kinds. I've seen in the social media space, in the online space, some doctors, for instance, saying things like, there's very little you can do in terms of alternative medicine or diet or supplements to affect, say, progesterone, as an example. And I would disagree. In fact, I was just listening to a podcast, and this one particular doctor who I agreed with so much that was what she was saying. And I certainly understood her frustration with the misinformation and the poor information that goes out there in social media influencer space. But the truth is that we do have the research, and I certainly have the clinical experience to say that there are herbs, foods, supplements, diet, lifestyle behaviors that can influence how our hormones are behaving. Some of these influences are pretty direct. And some of them are more indirect and harder to capture in scientific and research studies. But they are capturable, and there's certain things to look. And you do the deep PubMed search, you can find that these things that we're talking about can have direct and indirect influences on our hormones. And of course, lastly, there are drugs when we're looking for answers. And in this particular series of talks and in the class and the retreat that I'm doing, there are drugs and prescriptions that can influence our hormones in multiple different ways. The ones that, of course, we often think of when we're talking about women and hormones are hormone replacement therapies. They include thyroid, they include maybe adrenal support, some cortisols, and also they include estrogens, progesterones, DHEA, testosterone, things like that. And all of these things, in terms of looking for answers, these are all places to look, and figuring out what's going to work for each woman is definitely the art of the practice. And there's a lot of nuance here. And that's what I wanted to talk about in this particular kind of intro talk before we dive deeply into any of the details or those nuances. So I'm going to take a big step back again and say, how do we approach healing? When we're talking about women, when we're talking about women's medicine, and what I've been thinking a lot about is this place where being a woman myself, being a woman doctor, practicing women's medicine, and in evoking from many paradigms and many traditions in order to find the perfect fit for any individual woman, there's this art of the medicine women. And women experiencing medicine is this kind of collective continuum that I think is really powerful. And what I've been seeing happen online and in the YouTube world, the podcast world, the social media world, there is a growing amount, and I'm certainly seeing this in practice and professionally, there's a growing amount of women doctors that are speaking out, doing the research, doing the science, calling forth the research and the science, and speaking into the vacuum of not enough good information was getting out there about how women are different from men biologically. And there's been a lot of misunderstanding and misdirection in how we have handled some of the topics in women's health and wellness and aging and hormone treatments. So I celebrate that, and I have a few things to add. So one of the things that I find useful to do in practice is to orient myself to the big picture when we're going to go down perhaps some complex places of balancing hormones, balancing health, particularly if there's many different factors and multidimensional aspects to the woman who needs to figure out how to improve, how to heal, how to repair, how to achieve balance, how to achieve success, how to alter her relationships, her work life, her intimacy, how to handle the different changes and phenomena of her body as she ages. It is sometimes necessary actually to take a step back instead of just thinking that one prescription for a hormone or even a diet or a supplement is going to answer all of the imbalances. Because what happens and what is happening so much right now in this space, and I'm very grateful that we have the ability to prescribe hormones, that we have drugs, that we have modern science, and we have the ability to do different kinds of testing and to get different kinds of biomarkers. All of that's fantastic. But women's bodies are complex. Human bodies are complex. Women's bodies are certainly complex, and so are their lives. Their lives are complex. And though it's lovely when things can be straightforward, we don't always end up in that situation. So this diagram here is to orient, because what I find that we have to do for many women, not all women, but many women, we have to take a step back and figure out what they really believe that they are as a human being, as a woman, with their particular age, their particular job, their particular family relationships, their particular, like, what does it mean for them to be human, alive, as a woman? And how are those beliefs shaping the decisions that they're making, and their beliefs and their emotions and their feelings, and the diets that they're choosing and the exercise that they're choosing or not choosing, on the relationships that they're choosing or not choosing, the kind of medicine they're going to choose or not choose, all of that. So what are their fundamental beliefs about what this whole game is about? And then how, that's kind of the bedrock. And the next level is subconscious beliefs in large part. So sometimes we have to unpack that. And then what's their identity? And identity leads to mindset. So who they are. Do they only identify as a mom? Do they only identify as someone who must be taken care of? Do they identify as a businesswoman, as a power broker in their life? Do they identify as athletic? Do they identify as brave? Do they identify as sensitive, anxious, and fragile? Do they identify as someone who's sick and who's been sick a really long time? Their identity sets a lot of the conscious and subconscious aspects. And sometimes we really have to work in that mindset space, that sense of who they are, that sense of what they are, in order to unlock their potential and to unlock the change that we might need to see, whether that change is in their beliefs, in how they think, how they feel, how they're going to act. So the other thing that we have to work with transformation cases when we're looking for transformation is, after what they think they are and who they think they are, their subconscious beliefs, their mindsets, we have to figure out why. Why do they want to change? What's their motivation? What is their purpose? What is their mission? What is their reason to change? And is that why strong enough to motivate that change? And in that emotional space is where we're also going to find the emotional and mental patterns and behaviors that could be influencing their neurotransmitters and their immune system, their hormones, and their gut function, their sympathetic versus parasympathetic, the fight and flight versus rest and digest. And all of that is work that is sometimes more primary than figuring what prescription to write. And then lastly, it's the how. We finally get to the how. And there's a lot of tactics, a lot of strategies in how. And how can be many of those things that I said in those boxes. That can be how we're going to change the diet. That can be how we're going to change their lifestyle. That can be what kind of exercise should they be doing or not? How should they be sleeping? How should they be taking a supplement or a drug or a prescription, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The how are all the action steps, the how-tos that they need to implement. Or if you are self-treating and looking at your own transformation process, these are the things to ask yourself. And so I find that we need to move through some of these deeper places, and we can move through them quickly if people are pretty clear about who and what is going on. And sometimes for some people, we've got to really take some time to redefine and unpack what might be a lot subconscious. So step one in women's medicine, I think, is defining who and what you are. And I'm not going to take the time to do a lot of this, but if you haven't seen the Barbie movie and this clip,
It's impossible to be a woman. You are so beautiful and so smart, and it kills me that you don't think you're good enough. We have to always be extraordinary, but somehow we're always doing it wrong.
Anyway, she goes on for a few more minutes. And if you haven't watched that one, you should. Because it captures, I think, this idea that I have found over the past 30 years, both personally and professionally, that an awful lot of women find themselves caught in conflicting expectations of who and what they should be, and the standards that they have internalized, as well as the standards that are being imposed externally from either culturally, socially, their families, their religion, their partnerships, their intimate relationships, their work dynamics. There's a lot of messaging. Men have this too, but we're talking about women right now. And women find themselves overwhelmed, I think, in various states of conflict when it comes to balancing and sorting through their expectations for themselves, their internalized expectations, their internalized lists of shoulds, and the impossibility sometimes of being all the things to all the people in all the ways, including to themselves. And that creates a lot of stresses, a lot of emotions, a lot of self-talk, and a lot of overwhelm. And certainly in the very baseline, there can be a lot of confusion about what their goals should be, what their standards should be, and what path they should take. Far more so than men in my practice, when women come in, and even once we've identified what they really want to achieve, to become, the protocols, the changes, the alterations, and they have motivation, a huge resistance point for many, many women is their concern that if they change in various ways, it's going to be disruptive to the people in their lives. And that can be a light resistance all the way to profound and very big resistances. And so with navigating women's medicine, we are often very, very much navigating these internal ideas and expectations and feelings and beliefs, as well as their relationship in many different arenas, and figuring out how they're going to move forward in the face of their very interconnected world, and potentially the pushback or the challenges that they're going to get from making changes. So to recap, and again, in my classes and in my course and my work, we really unpack this a lot more in a lot of different ways. But figuring out what it means to be human is really just orienting yourself to, do you believe as a human being that you've got the power to change, to heal, to transform? Do you believe as a woman, as well as a human being, that you are capable of healing, of success, of transformation, of accomplishment, whatever it is the goal is, the change is? What are your conscious and subconscious beliefs that are shaping both the reality that you're in right now and the reality that you want to create? So redefining perhaps what you believe is within your ability to accomplish can be part of the medicine. And lastly, of course, what does it mean to be you? And that's where it's really personal and can get really intimate, and where maybe a lot of the deeper work is done, perhaps with journaling, perhaps with meditations, visualizations, and different kinds of exercises, cognitive therapies, emotional therapies, somatic therapies. This is where we have to figure out how your identity is shaping your pain, your problems, your limitations. When we're establishing the goals, I want to have more energy, I want to have less pain, I want to heal this disease, I want to achieve more optimization in this aspect of my life, we often need to shift to actually make progress from having those goals to setting the standards that they are going to use to define their identity, right? So setting standards is where we put a floor under what they expect from their lives, from themselves, from their behaviors, from their relationships. Setting standards is a reflection of who they want to be and who they want to become. And that can be far more powerful and defining than the goals that they're after. So the other thing we got to figure out as we're crafting a transformational journey is, how do you want to get there? We might have goals, we might have standards, we might have done this work, but do you want to go fast or do you want to go slow? Do you need to do a lot of micro changes? The drip, 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 little bit of changes. You don't want to rock the boat for either your own mental sanity or for your family or your work life or whatever you're trying to hold stable. Will the approach of slow, steady change, maybe even micro change, be what's really going to win the race in the end for you, because you're not going to be destabilized and you just need to take it slow and you need to be able to integrate these things? Or are you just done? Are you so deeply done and you need to go as fast as you can because things are painful mentally, emotionally, physically, and you're done and you need to get there? This is important negotiations in terms of the healing work that needs to be done. And the other thing to ask yourself or your patients/clients, whoever it is doing the women medicine work here, are, what are the rules that you have? There's the speed aspect, right? How much change, how quickly? I'm a vegan, I'm a carnivore, I'm paleo. People come to me with a lot of rules about their diet. They might come to me with spiritual rules or religious rules. They might have relationship rules or work rules. There are different kinds of rules. I've had people come to me and say, no matter what the disease condition, under no circumstances will I take a drug or a prescription. And we have to work with that. And there are other people that are, same thing with hormones, there's rules. And it's good to unpack for yourself to ask yourself, what are your rules? What are your non-negotiables is another way to say. And that can be both positive and negative connotations here, but your non-negotiables are whatever change that you're embarking upon, whatever your new standards or your goals or the phenom, what must be. And that can be what must not change, what you're going to preserve, what you're not going to risk, or how the transformation needs to happen, what kind of support you're going to need to get, what you're willing to do, what you're not willing to do. All of this is about boundaries. And in women's medicine, figuring out what boundaries to honor while you're figuring out what change and transformations you're exploring and you're looking for, this is an interesting balance. And we're going to talk as we go through about this concept of there are different forces at play. Busting through boundaries and limitations is one, and preserving and maintaining the stability of the right kind of boundaries and honoring the right kind of boundaries is another. And the balance between these two apparently contradictory forces is a big part of women's medicine. Sometimes many people have come to me saying the equivalent of, I want you to find a bold and innovative way to do everything exactly the same way it's been done for 25 years. They want all the change. They want it now. They want amazing results. They want to be different in significant and radical ways, but they also want everything to stay the same. These are conflicting desires, these are conflicting needs, and there is a point on that spectrum where you've got to do a little bit of both. And the simple truth is, change is hard. No matter how much you want it, no matter how much you might need it, no matter how desperate the situation is that requires change in order to live, to heal, to be more, to reach your goals, to set new standards, change is hard. And so many times the real work is figuring out how to make change work. So with everyone, but I'm going to say a little bit more with women, I like to think of women's medicine as finding the allies that a woman needs. What allies do you need? And there's many different ways of thinking of the concept of allies, of having allies. But when you're facing change, and we've got lots of research on this, if you're going to change yourself, your behaviors, your thinking, your feeling, your standards, your goals, if you're going to heal, having support, having the right kind of support, and there's so many different ways of thinking about the right kind of allies can make change something possible. A lot of people will not change without the right allies, period. You just won't get the change. But the more of the right kind of allies, whatever that means to that woman and that transformation, the more likely you are to succeed. Hands down, no question, huge. So there are so many different kinds of allies. There's so many different ways we could think of that word and look at that word. It was actually a medicine woman, actual Lakota medicine woman, that reframed coffee for me so that I felt less guilt when I was in naturopathic medical school. And everybody was trying really, really hard to be pure in diet and in their behaviors, or at least my cadre of people were. But quite a few of us could not stop drinking coffee because medical school. And when coffee was reframed for me as an ally, interesting enough, I treated coffee with more respect, and I used it more judiciously and medicinally, because I understood that I went to coffee not for the biochemical results that I was looking for, but I went to it because it was warm and I could hold it in my hands and it tasted good. And I put cinnamon, nutmeg, and creamy things in it, and medicinal mushrooms and all sorts of things. And it was a ceremony and it was a ritual, and it was something that I would do both myself personally, just me, myself, and dawn and nature, with a book or with journaling or with meditation, or I would do it with friends studying, or I would do it with friends over sharing stories. And coffee was a mental, emotional, physical pleasure, biochemical altering experience. And I used it, once I understood it, as an ally with less overindulgence. I could walk away from it temporarily as well. And I was just more intentional about it. And I actually got more out of it. Think of chocolate that way as well. And there are other things. But when we want to transform, when we want to heal, we have to figure out for ourselves, if we're talking about our own transformation, or for someone we're trying to help transform, a patient, a client, a friend, a family member, what kind of support do they actually need in order to move through this journey? What kind of guidance? Do they need a whole lot of scientific information? Because some of my patients do. I just send them all the research links, right? They want to know all the science before they take the turkey tail. They want to know the science. They want to know the research. They want bullet point how-tos. Some people want 10 pages of information. Some people want very carefully written steps. Some people want strict guidance. Some people want more amorphous directions. A lot of people need to feel loved. They need to feel seen. They need to feel that they are being received and heard in compassion and understanding. Some people need mentoring. So I've got some patients, give them a list of things to do and see them in 3 months. And other people, we create a program where they're checking in almost on the daily, maybe multiple times a week, different kinds of mentoring, different kinds of classes, different kinds of check-ins, and that different sort of guidance and different aspects of healing and transformation throughout their lives. Some people need to be in a community that are, sometimes an amazing thing happens when you get a whole bunch of people together going on one healing journey together, and they can support each other on that journey. Building community within healing dynamics is huge. Having friends to help you go to the gym, to help you do the diet program, to go through a personal transformation with Qigong, with meditation, with mindset, with altering behaviors of all kinds. Friendship is key. Community is key. Getting the right knowledge, right kind of allies. For me, if I'm trying to change a behavior that I'm finding sticky and hard to change, just more research, more experience, more testimonials. How have different people walked this walk? What does the science say? What do the Chinese, Ayurvedic people say? Were the Native American teachers that I had say, like, what are the different wisdoms? What are the different sciences? What are the different experiences? of people using this therapy, this treatment, this practice, this protocol like knowledge. I'm a knowledge sort of junkie, and that actually supports me in making changes. Nature, go to nature. When in doubt, study nature, be in nature, know how to interact with nature. In my class, there's a whole aspect of how to understand the forces of nature and go directly to nature. The sun, the air, the earth itself, fire and light, gem and plant and animal, like all of these forces are forces in nature that you can use directly, not just indirectly in a pill, in a capsule, but directly interacting with the forces of nature in order to find support, to find healing. And of course, there are all different kinds of therapies, picking the right therapies for support, the right kind of partnerships, professional clinical partnerships, what friendship community partnerships, what intimate relationship partnership, what kind of counsels do you need? Who do you want to go to? What sort of, and this for the women, that's why I'm calling it out here. What joys do you need to bring into your life for transformation and healing? What pleasures, right? How are you going to lure yourself into opening up to change, into continuing with change, into rewarding yourself for change? And I talk a lot about how to weave joys and pleasures into your protocols. So it's not all discipline and will and shame and guilt in order to drive yourself forward. Accountability is huge. Certainly, it's definitely one of the things that we can offer our friends and our community as they are going through change and through transformation. It's certainly one of the things that I offer as a mentor doctor with people working through their various processes, is different ways of checking in. I got a lot of other doctors that are my patients. They come to me in large part because they want the mentoring, the knowledge, guidance, but a lot of them know so much of this stuff already. What they're looking for is that mirror to talk things through and to be their check-in and to double check and to kind of keep them accountable as they do the things that they often know that they need to do. But they're using me as their accountability partner, right? To unleash their own wisdom on themselves. And of course, we just need encouragement. We need encouragement. We need inspiration. We need sometimes to be uplifted by the stories of others and by our mentors and by our friends, and just to be shown and to feel and to vibe up, leveling better emotions and better possibilities and visions of what is possible. And also ease so much in the healing journey for so many people, in the change journey. It's intense and it's hard and it's exhausting. And sometimes you need to weave in ease and breaks and rest, freedom from the push. Competition drives some of us, sometimes making a game out of it, making competitions out of it. I have colleagues then when we're trying to change things and transform, there's kind of a friendly competition that we introduce in kind of a sisterhood competition kind of way in order to find our unique, for that moment in that situation, allies in order to change. So doing medicine for women, to recap, could be helping ourselves and each other do nutrition, diet, supplements, and the right kind of fasting. But I'm putting fasting up there because people, if you don't really understand how nutrition and diet and supplements can affect your thyroid hormones, your adrenal hormones, and your female hormones and your testosterone, like all those diet fasting ideas and supplements out there, you can really mess yourself up. And I have had a lot of people come to me having put themselves or been put on various forms of protocols of nutrition and diet and fasting that really skewed and threw off their hormones. And so just understanding how hormones are impacted by these things, because hormones impact and these things impact hormones. And so we really need some information, better information out there, and more women need to understand that. Sleep optimization, huge. Posture. I have a class just on posture because posture affects our hormones, our stress, our nervous system, our brain, and our breathing and our immune system. It's crazy. Posture. Environmental health, we talked about that. Yes, detoxification is a thing. Oh, for all those doctors out there that still think that detoxification and cleansing is not a thing, people, there is tremendous amount of environmental toxins that are having a huge effect on inflammation, on gut microbiomes, and on our hormones. Gigantic. And so the appropriate understanding of how to do the right kind of detoxification and the breakdown of the hormones themselves, both the synthetic, the ones that we take in unbeknownst to us that we don't want to be taking in, but we take them in anyway from our environment, but also the ones that are prescribed to us, as well as the ones that we are endogenous, the ones we are generating ourselves. There is a process of hormone breakdown. And depending on how that's working, and the nutrients there and how the liver is able to manage that will have a huge effect on our body and our feelings and our experiences and our inflammation and things like that. So all of that's real. Massage, self-massage, topical oil, salts, botanicals. I have a whole class on that. Sauna and hydrotherapy, the right amount of sauna and cold and hot. Oh, women go through various stages in their hormone experiences, whether they're cycling through their menses and their luteal phase versus ovulation and all this kind of stuff. That and perimenopause and menopause and all of that will affect how they respond to hot and to cold and how we use hot and cold. Sauna therapies and cold plunges and all of that needs to be understood from the female perspective. And the thyroid perspective. Oh my gosh, yes. The right way of applying these things. I love saunas. I love hot and cold. I love them. I use them near daily. There are things to be understood here. And it's really important. Women will often have a dramatically different experience to sauna and cold plunges and all the cool biohacking things. I've been doing hydrotherapy and sauna therapies and cold applications for 30 years. And there's a lot I want to say about. So that's something to consider, but please keep in mind what you're seeing in social media and all the biohacking and all the cold plunging. It's fantastic, yes, but it very, very, very often has to be done differently depending on what you have going on in your body, in your nervous system, in your hormones, okay? And it can change depending on what's going on with your health and your hormones. So also strength training, same thing. How you do strength training and why and when and what kind will affect your hormones, but two will be affected by your hormones. Stretching, same thing. Zone 2 cardio, love it. This is when you're walking pretty fast or jogging or rowing or biking or whatever it is that you're doing. And it's a fabulous way to lose weight. It's where you can still talk comfortably and understanding how much of that to do or not do, depending on where you're at in your hormones, is really important. High intensity interval trainings is hugely impacted by where you're at in your hormone cycle. And by hormone cycle, I mean where you're at in your menses cycle, and also where you're at in the perimenopausal menopausal journey. Love high intensity interval training, love sprints, love the various versions of it. However, depending on your hormones will change really probably what you should be doing and how you should be doing it. Right? See, it's complicated. Mindset and meditation. So there are definitely mindsets and meditations that I do and I recommend and I teach very specific to women and women hormone phenom. And certainly emotional and mental repatterning for women. There's a lot of work around emotional release, somatic release, releasing trauma, releasing experiences, thought patterns, mental and emotional thought patterns that are stored in our bodies. Absolutely got to get that out of the tissues. Botanical medicines that are specific for estrogens, progesterones, and testosterones. And then, of course, one of my faves, the Qigong and yogic practices, the tantric practices that are specific for women. Breast and pelvic in particular, the meridian phenomena in particular, the liver aspect to balance the hormones, all of that, all of those practices I personally found when I was going through the perimenopausal, menopausal journey that when I reached into these traditions, the women medicine traditions of Qigong and yogic practices, especially Qigong, the Taoist traditions, that was where I found my best solutions personally. And for a lot of my patients that were just having a hard time dialing in all these other things, Qigong, certain yoga practices, but definitely some of the Qigong practices have been definitive in terms of helping with these female focused issues. So energy body practices in general, understanding them, understanding how to work with the energy flows in and around the body. And then lastly, of course, understanding the correct hormone testing and prescribing, as well as other medical tests and treatments. See all the things there is to know? But we're looking at it through the lens of being a woman. So let's talk hormones for a second, just to say. And these are not all of the hormones that I put on here. There's a lot more hormones that are involved that you can test and that you might want to consider. But just for a big picture moment, let's zoom out and let's look at this for a second. All of our hormones are affecting the other hormones and are being affected by the other hormones. And let's just call out testosterone a second. Women have testosterone, and how much testosterone we have can have a huge impact on how our bodies are behaving, our minds are behaving, our health is behaving. And so having the right amount of testosterone is huge, and it declines with age, just like estrogens and progesterones that people think of. And also, so many women are being put on testosterone right now. And I'm not necessarily against it, which is why I'm starting with testosterones, because I had to start someplace. What I'm seeing is that testosterones can be fabulous, right dosage, right time, right place for the right woman. But so many women are getting too much testosterone. I can't, the amount of times that we've got side effects from the wrong amount, wrong kind of testosterone applications, or because their man is getting testosterone creams and is applying testosterone creams, and they're getting some testosterone from their partner through contact. That has happened. There's so many different versions. Okay, so we have to understand that yes, we need testosterone. Yes, we need to nurture testosterone. Maybe we need to replace testosterone, but we've got to get that dosage right, because women are super sensitive to testosterone in good and bad ways. As an example, next on this little diagram here, testosterone is often the counterbalance or is counterbalanced by progesterone. And when I'm definitely seeing a lot of things if somebody is over testosterone, but you will see progesterone deficiency. You'll see the progesterone sink. Even if they were producing enough progesterone beforehand, then they get the testosterone, they get too much testosterone accumulating, and then the progesterone tanks. And we'll talk about those things in just a second. And you don't want that. That doesn't work out well. And women don't feel good on that. And so testosterone is affecting progesterone. Progesterone and estrogen are counterbalancing themselves as well. So testosterone is counterbalancing progesterone and estrogens. Testosterone can convert into estrogens. Oh, so I won't even get into the conversion talk, but progesterone and estrogens are dancing with each other. And I like to think, even when sometimes some aspects of the hormones are doing opposite type of things, I think better and more nuanced to understand that each one of these hormones have their own effects, and they are dancing with all of the other hormones. So some of them are becoming the other hormones, and some of them are influencing and affecting the other hormones in various different ways. So we've got testosterones to consider, and other androgens as well that I didn't put up here, like DHEA as an example. We've got progesterones, we've got estrogens, we've got pregnenolone that isn't up here that's becoming these things. We've got so many different estrogens. We've got adrenal hormones of all kinds, so many, the cortisols, DHEA, the other adrenal hormones, the thyroid hormones, more than just T3 or T4. We've got melatonin that's having a role to play in the balancing of all of this. And we've got growth hormone that has a role to play in the balancing of all this. Not to mention luteinizing hormone, follicular stimulating hormone, prolactin, oxytocin. People, there are so many hormones and they are all dancing with each other. So if you're going to prescribe them, you gotta take a moment and understand what you're doing. That's all I'm asking. Okay. So yes, hormones matter. Female hormones are complex. They are nuanced. They are interactive. They are highly influential. They are highly influenced by many, many factors in our lives. So many factors. This is a dance. This is a complex dance with a symphony orchestra in a ballroom full of multiple partners and multiple people moving in choreographed dance steps to the music. Which is why it's useful to learn practices that are generally harmonizing and balancing so that you don't get lost trying to influence this little piece, that little piece, this other little piece, which affects this other little piece. Then you're playing whack-a-mole, right? You got to like increase this hormone, decrease that hormone, and you keep on like doing all these little changes. Sometimes you got to do all the little changes, but the more you can take a step back and do big picture balancing, big picture harmonizing, the less you get into the minutia and the whack-a-mole experience. Okay. So, because the devils are in the details, they really are. Individuals will have very different hormone responses to diet, exercise, supplements, to herbs. Not everybody's going to respond to Vitex. I love Vitex. Chaste tree women really do increase progesterone levels, which is kind of hard to do naturally sometimes. But other women, you can give them all the Vitex that you want and their progesterone doesn't care. So individuals will have different responses to all these interventions. They will certainly have different responses to prescription hormone therapy, bioidentical or synthetic or whatever the prescribing. They will have individual responses, and those responses can change when other things change in their lives. So it takes time, it takes attention, it takes paying attention to the details to get the hormones right. It may also simply take trial and error. Sometimes you just won't know until you try, but you got to be paying attention. The woman who is having these experiences has to be paying attention, has to be tracking it, has to be journaling it, has to be a good witness to her own experience. You have to sometimes be testing it. You certainly, as a doctor, need to be tracking if you're prescribing things and really understand the nuanced phenomenon that's going on. And there's not enough of that happening out there. And so I'm begging women and doctors of women and practitioners everywhere, take a moment, take the time. If you don't want to take the time, then refer these women to the people that are going to take the time and to help unpack what might be going on for them. Some women are easy. I don't want to discount that. It's fabulous. Sometimes it's super easy. Write the script, out the door, everybody's happy. But a lot of times it doesn't work that way. So know that there are different responses to different method of applications, whether it's creams or oral or pellets or vaginal suppositories or more. The methods, the brands, and the rhythm of application for hormones can have very different effects in different women. I have had lots of women change brands. Technically, the script was the same. This is true for thyroid hormones too. The amount was supposed to be the same. The delivery cream or oral is supposed to be the same, but the brand was different and the experience that they had was sometimes noticeably, distinctly different. Happens with thyroid too. So keep that in mind. All these things can change the experience. So understanding the dramatic effects of our hormones can change everything in the healing journey, even if the problem is not a hormone problem, the arthritis or the cardiovascular disease or the immune system issue or whatever, the gut issue or the anxiety or the neurological issue. Sometimes we need to look at the hormones and figure out how the hormones might be impacting this other complaint, this other issue, this other problem. I've definitely had women come in. They appeared not to be in menopause, or they clearly weren't in menopause. They didn't even look to be in perimenopause, but their age was right. And the complaints that they're having different diagnoses, different problems, different issues. And when we really unpacked what might be happening in their hormones, it turns out that all of the issues, mind and body and emotions, were solved by treating perimenopause. It's really fascinating, the categories of symptoms and complaints that can fall into the category of hormonal. And knowing how to test those hormones and knowing how to look for that, knowing how to suspect it, and knowing how to apply therapy to that, I think is really not being addressed for so many women. And like I said, so many women are going into perimenopause so much earlier. Something to think about. There is a place for blood work with hormones. There are definitely times that I actually want to see the blood version of the estrogens, the progesterone, certainly the thyroids, the adrenals there. I find the blood work itself to be revealing in certain ways. I'm not going to unpack that clinically right now. But also, I find it to be really revealing sometimes to look at the urine metabolite, to look at saliva testing. On occasion, I do less saliva testing. I do more blood work and urine metabolites generally. That's just where I've fallen. And ordering the right test is definitely the first step sometimes. Sometimes you can treat as if, but if you're going to start prescribing hormones, it's really good to understand what's happening in that body in terms of the blood levels, in terms of the metabolites of these hormones. Interpreting them, of course, is the second step. So there's a lot of people ordering these tests, and I end up doing a lot of backseat driving of the interpretation of them. So there's a lot of free information about how to interpret a Dutch test and things like that. So it's out there, you can find it. And then, of course, figuring out how all of that is related to the actual symptoms and what sort of steps and protocols and replacements you might be doing. That's the next step. Okay. So can't leave this introductory talk as much as I want to talk all about Qigong therapies, ancient secrets, and tantric practices. Let's talk for a moment about estrogens. So estrogen is the divine goddess of the female hormones. I mean, she's certainly a dominant figure in the world of female hormones. Hard to deny that. Estrogen is powerful stuff. And estrogen is a steroid hormone. So this is kind of for people that might not know this. Estrogen is a steroid hormone. So it's created from cholesterol. Our body actually, by the way, makes most of the cholesterol. We need cholesterol. Healthy fats are huge for health and for healthy hormones. So we need healthy fats. The amount of people, of women in particular, that had disease crises and disease onsets back in the day when everybody was doing low-fat diets. For a lot of people out there, you remember that. The low-fat diet craze that happened for lots of years seemed to be a trigger for all kinds of autoimmune disease in particular. And because we need healthy fats, we need to be able to make cholesterol, we need to turn that into things like estrogen and our other steroid hormones. This estrogen is going to develop and affect and control our reproductive organs, our ovaries, the uterus, the breasts. It's responsible for developing our female sexual characteristics. It protects us from the negative effects of too much cortisol, protects us, shelters us from excess stress cortisol. It protects us from the negative effects of too much inflammation. So when we lose estrogens, we are suddenly at the mercy in a way that we hadn't been to cortisol and inflammation. It's protecting our cardiovascular system, our nervous system, and our brains. The loss in perimenopause and menopause of estrogens is one of the reasons why we can spike cardiovascular disease and nervous system degenerations and brain symptoms, cognitive symptoms, dementia, all kinds of things. So the loss of estrogen was protecting those organs. for us. It keeps our skin, our hair, our joints youthful and elastic and resilient by supporting the production of collagen and elastin. And again, keeping the inflammation down as well. And so as we're losing it, if we lose it, we have to account for that in a lot of our strategies. Of course, it's regulating the menstrual cycle. It enhances and maintains the breasts. It plays a major role in fertility, getting pregnant. It affects mood, desire, and brain function. Did I mention brain function? It protects bone health and bone density, which also incidentally affects and protects teeth and gums. So when you lose it, teeth and gums and bone health, all of that can be more susceptible to degeneration. Estrogen is playing a complex role, actually, in serotonin and dopamine function. So your pleasure, happy chemicals. There's a lot going on there, and estrogen is affecting it. There are three major endogenous estrogens that have estrogenic hormonal activity: estrone, E1, estradiol, E2, big player, and estriol. These are the ones that are at play during our reproductive years. The estradiol, E2, that is probably the biggest player and has the most profound effects overall, the dominant effect, but the other ones are doing things too. Estradiol is the most prevalent. There's another estrogen called E4. It's produced primarily almost always during pregnancy. But most of us, when we're talking about balancing hormones during our fertile years, as well as during perimenopause and menopause, estradiol is the big player. But knowing maybe when to use some of the other ones can actually help us to navigate the potential risks, the benefits, and different things. So there's some nuance in there. On top of that, there are estrogen metabolites. So our body produces these estrogens, and then places like our liver breaks them down. And there are at least 13, I think there are more now, estrogen metabolites of significance. Some are very beneficial, like the 2-hydroxyestrone. And by beneficial, I mean it acts as an antioxidant, it's anti-inflammatory, it's protective of cancer. It does a number of things that are good and beneficial, and having sufficient amounts of that as the body is metabolizing estrogen is important in terms of symptom control and also preventative issues, preventing disease. There's also phytoestrogens. So there are quite a number of food and herbs, botanicals, that will have estrogenic effects in our body. And they range from soy, which many people are familiar with, to things like fennel or sage. And knowing when and how to use phytoestrogens can be very useful for a lot of women. Also, just to add even more complexity, what I've mentioned, what we were talking about, synthetic estrogenic chemicals can be a massive player in how we're experiencing our bodies. So according to the Endocrine Society, there are nearly 85,000 human-made chemicals in the world and counting, going up, and at least 1,000 or more of those could be endocrine disruptors based on their unique properties. A lot of these are estrogenic, but you can have other endocrine disruptive chemicals as well. Quite a few different ones having different effects. Glyphosate is an example. A number of different chemicals in plastics, right? BPA you've heard of, but there's actually a whole host of chemicals that have estrogenic and other hormonal effects, and we are here in the West. So the excess of the wrong estrogens are clearly a problem, but so is a deficiency of the estrogens. So figuring out all of this, I mean, and there are some amazing supplements that can help process the excess. DIM is a classic extract of the cruciferous vegetables as an example. But I've had a lot of patients, for instance, take too much DIM in the wrong way, and it throws their estrogen balance off. Whereas helping to metabolize estrogen with supplements and herbs and diet can be really beneficial. It's a balance. You got to kind of know what you're doing here. All right. So other things to know: progesterone. So progesterone is, you can have excess, But progesterone, normally what I'm seeing is a deficiency in progesterone most of the time. To get excess progesterone, that's a little bit rare with disease processes. It absolutely does happen. Usually excess progesterone comes with excess supplementation or prescribing. Most of the time, we're looking for more progesterone in a lot of different scenarios in women. Progesterone calms, rests, nurtures. She helps shed the lining of the uterus. She wants pleasure. She's nurtured by pleasure. She looks for food, for carbohydrates, for glucose. She goes within. It's an inner journey. She increases circulation. She increases sleep. She increases sedation. Progesterone is a fabulous hormone that is often deficient for a lot of reasons. And then there's testosterone. So testosterone is for your motivation, for increased desire, for wanting to change, wanting to be creative, wanting to build muscle, wanting to be dynamic, want to have energy, vitality, building strength. Testosterone is needed for all of these things. Testosterone actually helps, enough testosterone during your fertile years helps not only build the muscle mass that you need and the bone mass that you want to maintain as you age, but also helps build and strengthen your skin along with estrogen. So testosterone loading appropriately can be really beneficial, including for things like beauty. I know it's not what we're normally considering when we think about anti-aging therapies, but it's part of that game as well. And we're getting towards the end. I know I've been talking too much. So many things to say. Okay. And I'm only scratching the surface, but hopefully this give everyone things to think about. Oxytocin. Oxytocin is a huge benefit to many women. Oxytocin is your endogenous, because giving exogenous oxytocin can be fabulous, but it's also super tricky. Endogenous, so in other words, the oxytocin that you create, your endogenous oxytocin, it stimulates what's known as the oxytocin receptor. And that stimulates growth and resilience and healing and repair. Oxytocin is the love, the love and connection hormone. Oxytocin can function as a stress coping molecule, an anti-inflammatory hormone, an antioxidant. It has protective effects, especially in the face of adversity, of challenge, of trauma. Oxytocin influences the autonomic nervous system to relax it and to ease it and to protect it. It also is beneficial to the immune system. And oxytocin is what's going to flood the mom after the birth of her baby. Oxytocin is triggered with the nursing. Oxytocin is triggered with orgasm and sex. Oxytocin is triggered with connection, friendship, and community, and feeling connected. You can feel connected cosmically. You can feel connected to yourself, to the earth, to the divine. You can have releases of oxytocin by profound feelings of connection, of love. And oxytocin is doing a world of benefit. Exogenous treatment has some challenges. We're not going to talk about that. So try to get the good stuff from inside of you. And again, pleasure and love and connection and intimacy and sex and all these things. Okay. So what do you do in the midst of all of this complexity? In the final analysis, that's why I put together this week-long series of classes. I'm going to be doing it every day at 5 p.m. Yes, it'll be recorded. So yes, going to have the recordings, but I just decided I'm going to do a week of teaching virtually with PowerPoints, with handouts, the PDFs and the lecture and all of that, and also some demonstrations of practices as well, all virtually. And then all of that will culminate in a weekend retreat, because the take-home message, even though there are different rabbit holes that I want to go down to in terms of treatment and balance and therapies and knowledge, the overall balance of thinking is balancing the yin and yang forces, balancing the male and female, balancing the hormones, balancing the hot and the cold, the fire and the water, trying to figure out how to, in your life, in your multidimensional being, create and understand the different lovers, and the different ways you can change how you respond to stimuli, both internal stimuli and external stimuli, when to be active and expansive, and when to be at rest and contractive and internal, when to be dynamic and strong and disciplined and willing and powerful, and when to be surrendering and nurturing and going into deep states of rest and repair and recovery. And this flow from one state into another, from one hormone spike to another hormone spike, as we're balancing these different forces within us. This is an art and it's a dance, and it deserves some discussion and some practices and some looking at it and some dialogue and some community. So the Sacred Feminine Empowerments is just a series, and really I'm going to pack into it as much as I possibly can, knowing that there'll be more advanced stuff that will need to come later. But I've thought through what I consider at least the foundation of traditional practices, traditional nature cure practices, traditional Taoist Qigong practices, and Ayurvedic Vedic yogic practices. Because some of my teachers are Native American, there are some shamanistic medicine woman practices within this, particularly in how I use some of the herbs. There's that thinking as well. So it's very synergistic. And of course, I can't help myself because I am trained in Western medicine. And I do want to have a subsection, not a deep dive, of understanding hormones testing and understanding hormone prescription, at least within all of this. But the practices are going to be primarily, because really just to leap in here, there's a massive need, a massive imbalance for the things that nurture yin. This is true for the men too. And sometimes we need to really lean into testosterone, into dynamic aspects and things like that. But there's definitely a preponderance of practices for deep rejuvenation. Deep rejuvenation requires deep yin practices. And these are the quiet, the resting, the self-care, the self-nurturing, the deep knowing, the deep stillness. And we're also needing to do practices of shedding blockages, shedding our old selves, shedding our old emotions. A lot of the practices involve getting out of our tissues and our minds and our emotional patterns, the things that we've stored there. That is huge. That is huge for women's medicine. And we need to get them out of our bodies, out of our muscles, out of our joints, out of our breasts, and out of our pelvic area. We need therapies of earth and nature connection, so deep intimacies with self and nature and others, therapies of self-love, some really just interesting unpacking of that. Hormone strategies, the big picture, as I mentioned, practices of the breast Qigong for health and youth, of the pelvic Qigong for healing and power, the yin yang balance practices, mostly yin cultivation, as I said. What's interesting is the tantric archetypes of male and female and how to use them as medicine. It's surprising to me how often the archetypes of what it means to be a woman, your version of what that means, because by the way, there are different female archetypes, just like there are different male archetypes. We can have both our internal male archetype as well as our internal female archetype. And we can use that understanding of those archetypes inside of ourselves to transform and do medical things and transformations, but we can also use them in terms of relationship healing. And that's been a very strong part of my practice. And so we're also going to do sort of selected natural therapies, some common ones, some uncommon ones, lots of emotional release practices that I mentioned with some gemstone acupuncture. If you come to the retreat, if you have the gems and you're already using acupuncture at home or gua sha tools or things like that, but definitely at the retreat, we will use that, and botanical topical therapies for sure. We're going to go over there, that hot and cold business that I mentioned, how to actually look at exercise, hot and cold, and other stressful therapies and protocols appropriately through the lens of hormones. So that is what I'm doing. So if you want to find out more, I will try to post updates about exactly when, where, how, and all the things, plus more free classes, because I'm going to do more free stuff too, on my website, drsarahhazel.com, or just email me directly, drsarahhazel@gmail.com. And make sure that I get you whatever information or help that you need, and just email me. I'll try to keep the website updated, and I'm trying to be better about posting and the YouTube channel. I got other people that are going to be doing that, but in the end, when in doubt, email me. Okay, I hope this was food for thought. I hope maybe it answered some questions and maybe made you ask some new ones. And I will see everybody next time. Take care. Send me an email if you've got any other questions. Okay, bye.